Greetings, welcome back to Black Bear News, where we are discussing climate change, abrupt climate change, and things adjacent. And thank you always for your comment and discussion. I'm going to bring you this story. I kind of just glanced over this, mostly saw the headline, but I thought it would be an interesting read. So I'm going to start this video off reading this from Fast Company. Focusing on how individuals can stop climate change is very convenient for corporations. Sure, it's morally good to reduce your footprint, but don't let that deflect attention from who is really to blame. This is from Morton Fibiger-Biscoff, and it's telling me that it's going to take 4 minutes to read this. Maybe not allowed. Maybe it's a little longer allowed. What can be done to limit global warming to 1.5C? A quick internet search offers a deluge of advice on how individuals can change their behavior. Take public transport instead of a car, or for longer journeys, the train rather than fly. Eat less meat and more vegetables, pulses and grains, and don't forget to turn off the light when leaving a room or the water when shampooing. The implication here is that the impetus for addressing climate change is on individual consumers, but can and should it really be the responsibility of individuals to limit global warming? On the face of it, we all contribute to global warming through the cumulative impact of our actions. By changing consumption patterns on a large scale, we might be able to influence companies to change their production patterns to more sustainable methods. Some experts have argued that everyone, or at least those who can afford it, has a responsibility to limit global warming, even if each individual action is insufficient in itself to make a difference. Yet there are at least two reasons why making it the duty of individuals to limit global warming is wrong, or slightly wrong. Individuals are statistically blameless. Climate change is a planetary scale threat, and as such requires planetary scale reforms that can only be implemented by the world's governments. Individuals can at most be responsible for their own behavior, but governments have the power to implement legislation that compels industries and individuals to act sustainably. Although the power of consumers is strong, it pales in comparison to that of international corporations, and only governments have the power to keep these interests in check. True and untrue at the same time. Usually we regard governments as having a duty to protect citizens, so why is it that we allow them to skirt these responsibilities just because it is more convenient to encourage individual action? Asking individuals to bear the burden of global warming shifts the responsibilities from those who are meant to protect to those who are meant to be protected. We need to hold governments to their responsibilities first and foremost. And a recent report found that just 100 companies are responsible for 71% of global emissions since 1988. Incredibly, a mere 25 corporations and state-owned entities were responsible for more than half of global industrial emissions in that same period. That's pretty amazing. That is an incredible statistic. And they're also responsible for buying the media time, or buying, the media influence to let you know that climate change isn't a problem. Also responsible for buying the politicians that are supposed to be protecting us from climate change. That is also a problem. Most of these are coal and oil producing companies and include ExxonMobil, Shell, BP, Chevron, Gazprom, and the Saudi Arabian Oil Company. China leads the pack on the international stage with 14.3% of global greenhouse gas emissions due to its coal production and consumption. If the fossil fuel industry and high polluting countries are not forced to change, we will be on course to increase global average temperatures by 4°C by the end of the century, or by 2022. Take your pick. If just a few companies and countries are responsible for so much of global greenhouse gas emissions, then why is our first response to blame individuals for their consumption patterns? It shouldn't be. Businesses and governments need to take responsibility for curbing industrial emissions. Governments and industries should lead, should being the operative word. Rather than rely on appeals to individual virtue, what can be done to hold governments and industries accountable? Governments have the power to enact legislation that could regulate industries to remain within sustainable emission limits. and adhere to environmental protection standards. Companies should be compelled to purchase emission rights, the profits from which can be used to aid climate vulnerable communities. Governments could also make renewable energy generation from sources such as solar panels, wind turbines, blah, 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 affordable to all consumers through subsidies. Affordable and low carbon mass transportation must replace emission heavy means of travel such as planes and cars. Absolutely. That's what should happen. More must also be done but guess what? These entities are not going to change themselves. Governments and corporations are not going to just change because they feel like doing the right thing. Again, what's the problem is that it's not only on us individuals to change our own habits and patterns, but to also change our thinking and to change other people's thinking, and to also put the pressure on the corporations and the governments any way possible that we can, because they're absolutely not going to change from within. They're only going to change if we absolutely demand it, and we're going to have to demand it. One way by various means, boycotts, political pressure, protests, etc., etc. All this is not to say individuals cannot or should not do what they can to change their behavior where possible. Every little contribution helps. Research shows that limiting meat consumption can be an effective step. The point is that failing to do so should not be considered morally blameworthy. In particular, individuals living in poor countries who have contributed almost nothing to climate change deserve the most support and the least guilt. They are neither the primary perpetrators of global warming nor the ones who have the power to enact the structural changes necessary for limiting global warming, which would have to involve holding powerful industries responsible. Absolutely. That's absolutely true. However, at the moment, right now, as we speak, people in poor countries are being told that they have to live like Americans, watch American movies, buy American products, or buy things that Americans have, buy cars, have refrigerators, raise your standard of living, have a job, get a good job, get a tech job, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Do Western things, stop doing, traditional things, which are traditionally lower impact carbon-wise. This absolutely has to be halted and stopped, that whole thing. But it's already, got its own inertia. While individuals may have a role to play appealing to individual virtues for addressing climate change, something akin to victim blaming because it shifts the burden from those who ought to act to those who are most likely to be affected by climate change. But, as far as a far more just and effective approach would be hold those who are responsible for climate change accountable for their actions. Again, it falls on us. It's an interesting article. It's pretty obvious, saying some pretty obvious things. The unfortunate thing is that those who are oppressed and those who are the victims of oppressive regimes shouldn't be the ones that have to change things, but unfortunately, power does not hold itself accountable. So it is it's unfortunate that it's the responsibility of individuals and regular people to hold power accountable, but that's just what needs to happen. There's just no, you can't just sit around and go, well, I can't do it because I'm the victim. They don't give a fuck about you. They don't give a shit about you. The corporations don't care about you. Government does not care about you. And the more the more you relinquish your own power, the more they shit on you. So, the only way for any of this is going to change is if we all see ourselves as powerful and take the power back. And that means taking action, and that means fucking doing something. The end. And that is the end of this video. That's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for your eyes, your ears, and your conscience. If you would like to support this channel, you can do so at the links below. Until next time, peace.